Even though this is called In the Earth, some of the images here are so bizarre that you can even say they're otherworldly. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. Today, we're talking about a brand new theatrical release, In the Earth. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts on this movie were, if you already saw it, or if you were planning on seeing it, and make sure to hit that thumbs up button if you like these reviews, as it helps me out immensely by getting my channel out there. And if you're new here, I hope you consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with reviews of new releases, older films, hidden gems, and so much more on a near daily basis. But let's jump right into it and let's talk about In the Earth. This stars Joel Fry and Ella Retortia as Martin and Alma, a scientist and park scout who venture deep in the forest for a routine equipment run, as the world searches for a cure to a disastrous virus. This is written and directed by Ben Wheatley and was notably filmed during the pandemic and marketed as a pandemic horror movie. We've already gotten a number of these films over the past year, trying to cash in on the pandemic craze, with Host being the only one that really wowed me, to be honest. I mean, unless you count Borat 2, but that wasn't initially made as a pandemic-centered movie, and it's not even horror. But anyway, I've heard a few people call this one of the better pandemic-inspired movies, and I guess, sure. Not that the competition's really strong in that department, to be perfectly blunt. I'd say technically this is one of the better ones, but this didn't blow my mind or anything, or come close to the same level as, say, Host. Not that I'm going to make this whole review a comparison video or anything, but just saying. Now, I gotta be honest, Ben Wheatley has been a considerably hit and miss director for me. This is now the fourth film of his that I've seen, and it's only the second one that I felt was at least decent. I haven't seen his first few films, and I hear those are critically acclaimed, so maybe I'll get lucky there. But his last film was Rebecca, which I thought was dull, and I also just couldn't get into High Rise, and while my favorite of his has been Free Fire, even then I'd say it's a decently fun action comedy, but nothing incredible. And outside of that film, Wheatley seems to be a very style over substance sort of guy, and that's once again on display here. And if you did wind up really liking this one, then great. I'm not here to say that you're wrong or anything. I just didn't think it was amazing. Now, I will say that visually it is really solid, and probably one of his nicer looking films that I've seen. There will be a lot of tight close-ups that, despite taking place in the open woods, give the film a claustrophobic feel. And we'll get these rapid-fire cutaways to these bizarre images, sometimes as these sort of hallucinations that characters experience, and they'll be like nightmare fuel, and that goes hand in hand with a number of sequences involving one character who has this setup by themselves in the woods, and in order to scare people away, we'll start flashing these strobe lights that give off this feel of disorientation to both the other characters and the audience. And this will be accompanied by a really chilling soundtrack that gets increasingly more intense as the film goes on, and those will especially come into play when Wheatley plays into more of the survival aspects of the story. Early on, Martin and Alma encounter a loner in the woods named Zach, played by Reese Shearsmith, who was by far the most intriguing character here, because it's not too long after they meet him that he turns out to be totally unhinged, and part of the film involves Martin and Alma trying to lose him, as his unpredictable swings get violent. And whenever that was the focus of the film, that was easily the most intriguing element, and it would be genuinely intense. That's where all of Wheatley's stylistic choices are at their most heightened, and you find yourself unable to look away, especially because you feel how much of a threat this guy is, and don't have to second guess how catastrophic it would be if he got the upper hand on them. However, that's not always the center of the film, and when it's not completely focused on that conflict, it can be a little hit and miss. For one thing, while Joel Fry and Ella Retortia are very good here, their characters aren't the most interesting. We learn very little about them, nor do they really have an arc. We do care about what happens to them in relation to whenever they go up against Zach, but when that isn't the case, there just isn't much here. Though I will say, Torchia does get some really solid action-oriented moments that I did appreciate, so there's that at least. There's another character named Olivia, played by Haley Squires, who is a colleague of Martin's that hasn't been seen by anyone in months, who we then also encounter here. I won't get into too many specifics because of spoilers, but it turns out she's also pretty unhinged, though not so much in a dangerous way like Zach. She definitely has a more interesting personality than either of our two main characters, but her motivations can also be unclear. She's looking for something based on these cryptic images she sees, and she's trying to get the other two to help her, but as we get more involved in that storyline, it starts to become a little incoherent at times. Again, the rapid-fire cutaways and some of Wheatley's other stylistic choices are utilized heavily in this part of the story, and some of it looks great. A lot of the more bizarre images will remind you heavily of the film Annihilation from a few years ago, which I think is a great movie, but I'd say this isn't as satisfying of an experience as that, because you're unsure of what it is exactly they're looking for or what any of it means, and as the film moves into its final stretch, I won't spoil it, but it becomes a lot more abstract and open-ended, but not in an intriguing way. It's one of those films that doesn't give you enough to put everything together, instead opting to go for this series of bizarre, overly stylized choices that don't come together in a satisfying way, and it feels more like a drug trip than anything. And the way it cuts off, when it ended, I just went to myself, that's it? And I've said this before, I am fine with movies that end things on a note that gets you thinking and encourage you to put some things together for yourself. But as a filmmaker, you also need to give the audience enough to work with, and I think you should be able to have some sort of clue, at least of what's going on, after the first watch. This is one of those movies that makes things purposely confusing towards the end, and almost forces you to have to watch it multiple times in order to get it. And to me, that's not really a satisfying experience. In the Earth is okay. I think it's one of the more watchable movies I've seen from Ben Wheatley so far, but he continues to be this very hit-and-miss director for me. There are some genuinely thrilling and engaging sequences, especially when it leans into its survival elements, plus it looks beautiful and has a chilling score. Though while the performances are good and the supporting characters are intriguing, parts of the main story are intentionally too cryptic, and our main characters are uninteresting, leaving not much room for emotional investment. I think the movie's watchable overall, and I'd say the good just outweighs the bad, but I'd say wait for it to hit streaming before giving it a watch. In the Earth gets a 6 out of 10. So let me know, did you see In the Earth, or are you planning to see it, and what were your thoughts? Do you have a favorite movie set in the pandemic so far? Do you have a favorite Ben Wheatley movie? Let me know in the comments below so we can discuss. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it, and for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching everyone, and keep having fun with film.